the womb in 7 years old, where our brain is in what's known as a gamma brainwave state. It's a very hypnotic state. It's a state hypnotists put you in to make behavior change. And we're in that state for a reason. It's because 85% of everything we'll ever know in our lifetime, we learn between womb and 7 years old. If you consider colors, fruits, shapes, how to walk, how to run, how to swim, almost everything we learn happens in that time frame, and we can only do that if our brain is in a...
Welcome back to the Consciousness of the Way. It's very exciting to meet this podcaster or celebrity, I would have to say, because she has this incredible insight to so many different facets of mental, emotional, physical, spiritual training. She implements that in her everyday life and wisdom teaching through many different forms across her training systems. I want to welcome to the podcast, Jacqueline Stats. How are you?
Hey there, Sam. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's another day in paradise. Exciting times. And furthermore, let's just talk about your insight. What provoked you to gather all this information and create such an interesting resume that goes from one spectrum to another? And let's get an understanding of how you implement that to help others find themselves.
Well, I really had no choice in it. I've been drawn to this my whole life. I'm 50 years old, and from the time I was a small child, I was just fascinated by the concept of mind over matter. And, learning in elementary school that, we're not even truly matter. We're just, atoms and electrons and all these tiny microparticles traveling through vast empty spaces that were essentially made out of the same components as our windows and our walls, but it's our perceptions of things that make them what they are. That was a puzzle I couldn't let go. And it's really haunted me my entire life. And as I grew into adulthood, I came out of the sort of typical American family with the typical American diet and the typical American ailments. And I knew that there had to be a better way. And so I really got into athletics and nutrition. And then it was very apparent to me, I got into endurance sports, that the major component, the major difference to people taking these steps, making these changes is the mind, not the body. It's where your mindset is at. And even when it comes down to illnesses, it's how we process and metabolize our experiences, or if we stuff them away somewhere inside, that determines whether or not we will end up with illnesses and ailments. So I really wanted to study with all the ancient wisdom traditions and to find each one's perspective on it. And they're all so similar that they all very much tell the same story. And I feel that I am the translator of that information to the people that I help. Typically, most people want to be healthier. They want to have some more joy in life. They want to be able to let things go in their mind. And they just don't have the tools to do it. Mm-hmm. There's usually something sort of holding us back. We all know how to eat healthy or exercise, but the question is, why don't we do it? And that's what I really like to get a hold of, is those blockages that keep us tied into our set patterns in life. And we see them repeating over and over. You ever meet that person that's been married like 3 times and they basically married the same person in a different body every time, and they don't know why it's always catastrophic. We stay in these ruts, and they're usually, from our early childhood, our early programming. We find things very comfortable. And I also work a lot with that victim mentality, is the poor me, and what to do about that. It's something that we kind of carry with us, and we can never really heal until we let that go.
Interesting. So how would you apply some of these ancient techniques to birthing or exposing this incessant finite mind and the repeating bankruptcy of the intellect that is the very character that looks back at you in the mirror, the flesh and blood that you perceive as identity, all has a story, right? So we all have this story. We have this programming. You referred to programming. I'm assuming you're referring to conscious and unconscious process would be more in line with the childlike behavior, birthing it into an adult sort of belief system is sort of the same old repetitive loop that takes place. I'm very interested in how you apply that to help people dissolve their blockages.
Well, I tend to see us as sort of an AI. Is, between the womb and 7 years old, where our brain is in what's known as a gamma brainwave state. It's a very hypnotic state. It's a state hypnotists put you in to make behavior change. And we're in that state for a reason. It's because 85% of everything we'll ever know in our lifetime, we learn between womb and 7 years old. If you consider colors, fruits, shapes, how to walk, how to run, how to swim, almost everything we learn happens in that time frame. And we can only do that if our brain is in a acceptable state. What happens also, though, is patterns, behavior patterns. Everybody always talks about cancer is genetic. Oh, they have the fat gene, that's genetic. What is passed down is behaviors. And we learn those behaviors, they become imprinted in us up until 7 years old. And we will repeat those patterns throughout our lifetimes unless we take an active role in installing a new pattern. Mm. So, we gain all of our information on the world through our five senses. And that's why I say we gather all this information, and then we have our preferences, we have our traumas. We learn if you put your hand on the hot stove, it hurts. So we don't do that again. People learn that if you get up and speak publicly in front of your class, people are going to laugh at you. So you don't do that again. All of these things make imprints on our psyche, on our mind, and it becomes ingrained behavior patterns. We avoid the things that cause us harm, whether it's real harm or not, perceived harm, and we go towards things that make us feel good. And those things could be sugar, they could be things that aren't necessarily good for us. So I like to think of the mind as something that is just a set of programs, and we can identify programs that don't help us. We have to be very curious about why they're there. We have to find the backstory and see how they got lodged in there to begin with. Gives them some grace and ease to heal that, have some compassion for self that it was there to begin with. And then once we get to that point, we can work on installing a new pattern. So we have a new way of living. Maybe I don't go to sugary foods to comfort myself anymore, but I'll decide to go and do some yoga instead. I can install that program. And then through reinforcement, it becomes just who you are.
Mm. It sounds exciting.
I love it. It is exciting.
It sounds very simplistic. So you install it, delete it, reprogram it. This still conceptually, from most looking at it from the outside in, would seem, in the category of some implementation that it needs to start from the body to affect the mind. So for it to, because they're mirroring each other, there is this infrastructure, the neuroplasticity, the inner web of the two. Are you referring to, accessing unconscious process and then changing what are the most sexy spiritual words these days, triggers and traumas? It's got to all be the information, the energy. Reality to me is three things: a thought, feeling, and an emotion. That's it. It starts and ends with that. Now, what you do with it is interesting. If you find out that your daddy didn't give you 5 cookies when you were 5, And this is the very catalyst to your dismay and despair and discouraging thoughts of just complete helplessness and hopelessness, which returns us to the victimhood you were talking about. It is a very general programming for the human condition. It seems to be quite popular. When you look around, it's like, oh, it's interesting how many people have the same type of conditioning. So what would you use as a tool to access these things and make them absolutely deleted and refreshed and have a whole new outlook on life?
Well, every person is different. We're all come from different experiences, and there's different reasons why we have the feelings that we do. To compare someone like myself to, one of my clients that has some, experience with the military and PTSD, there's similarities in the way we store things, but the way that we go about things is different for every individual. I do a lot of background information. I get to know my clients very well first, because we're all so different. Now, for me personally, it's very easy for me to move my body. That's where I can see immediate results. If I have a hard time getting out of bed, I know that I can get up and do some jumping jacks and get my day going. For somebody else, it might be very different. Moving their body is the hardest thing. So therefore, we would start with something more cerebral for them. I like to start with low-hanging fruit. Whatever is easiest for you is where we want to start, because a rising tide raises all ships. My work is holistic. It's mind, body, and spirit, and they are all inextricably connected. In the Western world, we separate them all, and we do ourselves a real disservice. There's so many people that don't heal because their entire identity is tied up in whatever it is that has hurt them. You ever meet somebody, and the first thing they tell you is their trauma, and they can give you this story that they've told to hundreds and hundreds of people before you, and they can't heal until they no longer identify their personality with that story. They need to find out who they are first. And they may not know. So the beautiful thing about this work is they get to develop who they are. We're constantly and dynamically changing. We are not stationary. I have the same thoughts as I did when I was 10, but I don't have the same body. In fact, not one single cell from my 10-year-old self is still with me, but my mind still works very much the same, and I still carry those memories. So we're changing all the time, and we actually get to create ourselves with every little change. Every single thing I eat creates the new me. All dead skin cells are sloughing off right as I'm standing here, and new cells are being generated. What do I want them made out of? Do I want them made out of, lunch meat and chips, or do I want them made out of some healthy organic spinach and nutrients and sprouts and peppers, something that I decide who I want me to be. And I help my clients form that vision of who they want to be, and make it attainable for them. The big thing with coaching is breaking it down into little steps and celebrating victories, because let's say if somebody wants to run a marathon and they've never run before, to go out and run 26 miles, they're going to feel like crap. They're probably going to get 3 miles done. They're going to be sore, and be down on themselves in their mindset. So with coaching, it's like, let's go run around the block today, and tomorrow run around the block twice. And, and then when 3 days occurs that you didn't run around the block, that's when we get into the work. Why? What's the why? Let's figure out what the blockage is here that's keeping you from doing this thing you said you wanted to do.
Mm.
Everybody wants to be healthy, but who's actually doing it?
Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I've met many mastered people in different levels of healing, and they're all, I come across a guy who's like 90 years old, levitates at least 4 to 6 inches off the ground, and smokes a bag of weed every day. Yet that is his sustenance. And, it would make no sense to the normie, the average Joe that's looking for answers, some mystical weirdo levitating off the ground, other than that's beyond logic. And they go, well, how is that even possible? That's like a movie thing, and I'm witnessing it. It's very tangible, very real. Levitation is a system, a processes, a method that I teach people, but it doesn't end with that. It's like the embodiment, right? So I love the way that
Can you levitate?
myself. No, there's only 3 people I've ever met in my lifetime that it takes about 12 to 18 years of training. And I wouldn't even waste my time with that. One of my students can. And that is all related to how you integrate the energy potential of yin and yang. So in a system, everything starts with the dielectric to the magnetism, and that magnetism is the pulse to all animation. And for us, that's what we call the primordial mother. So that pulse animates the consciousness animates the Shen, which is the spirit animates the energy animates the body. And there's about a 4-level development between Shen and consciousness that for a Taoist alchemist, we embark on to fortify this sort of mastery of the energy potential. But energy is transitory, it's impermanent. It's not something that is forever lasting, even though people would like to believe that, because yin and yang is made up of distortion. Everything that's constructed, if you get the pulse is what animates all of things. If you have a cell phone, if you have a cup, this is denigrated. It will disintegrate at some point. It's like when you have a thought, feeling, and emotion, that is a wave that's distorting the energy or the pulse, and it will be impermanent. It will diminish. It will fold back in on itself. This is part of the Taoist metaphysics. But generally speaking, everything will return. So that understanding that everything is completed and rebirthed every second of every minute, meaning your potential and opportunity to create what we call Wu Wei, which is taking that pulse, holding that, because it consists of vibration, frequency, and ultimately resonance. That resonance, once held from any manifesting coach or guru or whatever, they'll go, you hold that, and then people talk about action. Well, action is breath from a Taoist perspective. So the breath, instantly you access what we call Wu Wei, which is serendipitous, synchronistic, it's good to be me moments that never leave you.
I call it the flow state.
Well, that's what Bruce Lee coined it back in the 70s, because he was trained by a Taoist priest. And that's where everyone goes, oh, the flow. Yes, you must be like water, my friend. Flow like water. Yeah. Good job, Bruce. I got you. It does. It creates unification. It's beautiful. So let's talk about this. So you're talking about the body, and I find it interesting, neuroplasticity and, epigenetics and all these types of things that everyone loves to get into from a physicality perspective, giving people opportunity to have, Imperium Dominion, maestro over their flesh and blood. Do you step into an epigenetic model at all, or is it more? Yeah.
Absolutely. And my studying is Tibetan Buddhism and also the Vedas, and amongst many other wisdom traditions. However, epigenetics, it's a new coined word for an ancient system. The ancients knew that you could change your gene expression by how you show up. Through meditation, through mindset, you can actually physically upregulate the genes that cause good health, and a poor mindset will upregulate the genes that cause disease. This is known, but nobody can patent it, nobody can sell it, and that's why they hide it. Neuroplasticity, again, is an ancient system that's been given a lovely new buzzword, So people can market it and they can sell certification programs. But neuroplasticity just means what I've been talking about, the ability to go in and change your mind.
Mm.
And you can change your mind. You know, that vibration you were talking about, how it comes, it's a feeling, and then it collapses. That's the natural way. Just like we go through seasons. You know, spring is birth, and summer is growth, and fall is harvest, and winter is decomposition, which that decomposition welcomes us to spring, where all of that is used for new growth. But what happens with most people is they take that one wave and they hold it. And they keep replaying it and replaying it and replaying it and replaying it. And that's where I get what I call a rut, where you just get stuck in this one rut of a way of doing things, a way of thinking, a way of mindset. And that's what I really love to help people fish out and find out why it's there, what it's doing there. Have some humor with it. I'm big on finding ourselves very laughable, and then moving on. You know, it's been proven that if you actually really feel an emotion, like you said, it only lasts 90 seconds. But the problem is we don't allow ourselves to feel them. We've been taught that we're not supposed to ever be sad, and we're always supposed to be happy, and we're always supposed to be productive. And, you know, even if you had an ethnic grandmother that came from the old country a couple generations ago, she would tell you, you've got to sit there and feel it to heal it. You've got to go through the shit for a couple days, get it through your system, and then move on. But, you know, we're very in a culture where everything's an inconvenience, and we're supposed to pop a pill for every slight ailment. And those things just keep us in the repetitive patterns.
Yeah, it's like one of the first things I like to share with people is it's sort of basement level stuff. It's the beginning of your journey from a seeker to a knower through your belief system. It's a very simplistic understanding that your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. And then people are like, oh, shit, I didn't get that memo. But you see, it all has that energy potential that we speak of. So, you know, we call it the Fa Jun. It's the juice. So this energy, this what we call kinetic expansion, you would refer it as a biofield. Most of my parapsychologist friends call it psychokinesis. You know, that's part of the things that, you know, I put under the blanket of sensory perception that I teach people: clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, healing, energetics, whatever it is. It happens to go under that guise of Taoist alchemy. It's been around, as you said, consciously. Taoism, from an alchemical process, has been around on paper 6,000 BC. I mean, but again, that's very soft. All these ancient practices continue. We continue to discover that they've been around longer than time. So there's something to this mentorship from, you know, one generation to another as they hand this ancient wisdom down. Furthermore, than the insight within all of the Taoist canons or anything that I'm ever taught by, you realize that this is the highest point of ascended state of unification, is direct source information. Not something that someone else has contorted, but your access to know the truth. Know thyself, and absolute truth is only your truth, and that is determinative by your experiential moment, and that is now. That is the now moment. It doesn't possess a past or a future, and that is where you obtain what we call the pulse, the primordial mother, where now you have access to, and always have had access to, this pulse. It has never left you. And that's the very distorted part, where you have to go from human condition through the labyrinth of the finite mind out the other side to human beingness, which is unified, discovering this incredible gift. What do we call this? Sentience, you know, the incredible insight of empathy that raises humanity's ability to increase and expand that pulse. And it takes wisdom teachers like yourself to make that possible. And the more and more that this is expanded across the globe, especially planet Earth, we will find this consistency. You speak on the brainwave gamma. I find that really interesting. Let's talk more about that, because anything that I've ever witnessed in healing, and I've been measuring my brainwaves for over 20 years, is I normally sit within a 40, 100 hertz, and I'll see anything from, physical healing, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. This is complete dominion of your state. That means that for the audience level, when Jacqueline's mentioning this, gamma is complete consciousness. That means you access every frequency that the brain can transmit at once, giving you the opportunity to alter anything that might be problematic within the unconscious mind that you think is untappable. So how do you use that type of technique?
Well, I don't measure it like you do, and I have a slightly different understanding of it than you do.
Sure.
I don't get into the electronics. I help people get through meditation and through guided meditations. What I like to do with my clients is one-on-one, we do the deep work. For a lot of people, they've been hiding from themselves for so long, and they're hidden from their innate wisdom and from their own ability to tap into the all. Because truly, we were discussing before we started recording about the cloud, but all the wisdom sits in a cloud, and it's all there available for us to download at any time. And all our job is to remove the blockages to tapping into that. So again, I like to address it with the physical, is eating healthy, opening up the energy channels in the body so that we can allow the mind to be still, because that's really important. If you're drinking caffeine and you're taking Adderall, you're not going to meditate. So you've got to get yourself to a point where, some of those things have no effect on you. I can have a cup of coffee at this point in my life and still meditate. In the beginning, there's no way I could do that, but I do have a lot of control over how my cells behave. I also like to remind us that we are not physical beings, that the physical world is bullshit, that everything is just simply consciousness. So matter doesn't truly exist. It's just somehow how we're experiencing this world and learning about our energy. Matter is simply energy slowed down to the slowest possible vibration. So, when you consider those concepts, and through the work that I do, I help people discover who they are, and then I take them through to finish a guided meditation to imprint these new behaviors, to imprint these new thoughts into their mind, and to have them have a lasting power and something that they can go back to day after day.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes back to this lens that we speak of within Taoism. It's called the bellows. Everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. This is the symbiosis, the tango, the undulating flame that we refer to as yin and yang, that energy potential. And the most valuable commodity is your attention. That is the most valuable commodity in this material state. We refer to alchemy as immortality crystallized in the material. And that comes from being completely conscious. That is how you access this stuff. And I love the way you use ancient techniques like meditation for an entry level for someone to have dominion over this potential. I mean, epigenetics is conceptual for most. Lipton's been whining for decades, and finally now he's the hardest person to get to have a conversation with, yet he was a crackpot for 40 years. It's interesting, but in essence, it's the stepping away and realizing that to be whole, which is what healing in definition means, is basically does not require your participation. And people are like, what? what do you mean it doesn't require my participation? Well, this is where you need to start understanding how potent that everything is really just energy, frequency, vibration. How do you obtain that? Where do you get it from? Where is the end run? And your wisdom teaching starts with a culmination of these three things, from what I'm gathering from what you're sharing with me: mind, body, and spirit. And that integration really is fantastic as they return. The goal is to return, I imagine, so that they remember that they're whole. And that sort of participation doesn't need your personality, your ego, your finite mind. These are all sort of like concepts until otherwise noted. You know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. And that's how evidence is so critical. So when you create the evidence, like neuroplasticity, for example, I came from a background of powerlifting and bodybuilding for many years and got to a epic level. Yeah. For a woman to obtain that type of muscle density in a natural state, because I can tell you haven't been using any PEDs. So, it all comes down to the seed of your belief and how you can keep reinforcing it. I got the first recollection of that when I was a young boy, because I didn't have any reason not to believe it was possible. It was only when I was corrupted, realizing at the age of 19, after training for 9 years, that Arnold Schwarzenegger was using PEDs all day long. I was like, oh, what a bummer. But I still obtained lifts, 800-pound deadlift, 800-pound squat, and I was walking around at 260 with just my mindset. So anything is possible. Understanding that, it's like, what would you do? I like to shake things up, because that lower energy. So I imagine you refer to chakras. Do you use chakras at all in relation to energy, or do you talk about those?
I work with them a lot myself, or quite a bit myself. Sometimes with clients. With my clients, it tends to be a lot of trauma and behavior change. We work for a certain while to get to homeostasis. And then from there, I demand that they take a little break, maybe a couple of weeks. And then quite often I get, they got out of the woods, and then they look at me and they say, well, I want a little of what you're smoking. At 50 years old, I'm just in a phenomenal state of health. I don't take a single supplement every day. I haven't taken a prescription med in probably 25 years. And I'm the happiest person I know. And that doesn't mean I've got everything. I just live a very simple lifestyle. I've got myself in the right place where I want to be. And I have so little things to clog up my mind. And I like to help people get to that point, because most people can't meditate because they can't stand to be alone with themselves. And then to be vulnerable to everything that the mind throws at them when they're in that state. I learned to meditate because I could never shut my mind off. I mean, I'm incredibly brilliant. I have a lot of thoughts, and always trying to figure things out, but I also had a lot of rumination. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of resentments. And even though I looked happy and fun on the outside, and I always was, I couldn't shut this mind down. And I started noticing, lines forming, which were much more prevalent 12 years ago than they are even now at 50. But, I was wondering, why am I always looking like this? Why do I get in my car and instantly everybody around me is a freaking idiot, except for me, and filled with rage? There had to be a reason. And when I really sought to dig that out and to understand me, it just was such a beautiful riddle. You do have to have humor for yourself, because we're all just super messed up, and to just be able to laugh at it and let it be in the past, and forging a new road forward, because the more you carry that with you, the more you continue to live that lifestyle. So it does come with letting a lot of things go, mindsets, things that we thought were important. But I help people through that, because most of my clients say, I know there's something in me that needs more, or I know there's some light at the end of this tunnel, but I can't reach it, or I'm stuck under this feeling that I can't get out of, or, I've got one of those guys, you ever meet the guy that's got all the injuries, and he can show you on his phone, all his pins and bolts through all his parts, and it's like, that's his ownership of that he's tough enough and all that, but what is it that makes him so accident prone? There's something there that he gets out of it. And so I love the grand mystery of fishing those things out, making them digestible, because we have to be able to metabolize it. Just like our food, we have to digest it and make it be a better part of us rather than a worse part. So I like to take those memories or the horrible thing you did in 4th grade and make it humorous, make it something you can digest, make it something that you can put into your system, find a meaning for it that can carry you forward. And then, like I said, install some new behaviors, some new advantageous ways to be. But the truth is, the better we feel about ourselves, the easier that is to get done. So a lot of people have to start with those small wins, losing a couple pounds or learning how to sleep or something before they can really get into the hard work.
So I want to get back to the conditioning, right? So, most people will talk about autonomous. I know you're on a very tight schedule here. Autonomous, autonomic nervous system, the entry level to all the things you don't think about, which shows you possession of this pulse that I've been talking about through this conversation. That is it. You don't participate in your blood pumping, your breathing, or any animation of the body. It is autonomic in its nature. So, okay, if we possess it already, how's the fastest way to erase the roadblock? When you use meditation, what is the general processes that will give people solace and evidence? Because really, people's belief to knowing comes from experience. They can't experience it. I mean, that belief system, let me be very clear, doesn't mean that you believe it something that is actually going to benefit you. You may continually get evidence that reminds you that life sucks because you're good at repeating that stuff.
You'll get evidence for whatever you seek evidence for.
Well, it comes from that experience. So, you trigger something, as you would put it, thought, feeling, and emotion. How that is, what that turns into is up to the seeker, right? So when you use meditation, this is where the transformation takes place, where you're able to dissolve these blockages. Is that what you're saying?
I don't dissolve the blockages. I help people see a better future. It's up to everybody to dissolve their own blockages. I show them how, because this isn't going to be the only blockage they ever have in their life.
Right.
That's the big difference between me and, say, therapy or something like that is, I don't want you in my chair once a week for the rest of your life. I want to teach you the skills that we get through these few things together, so that when the new things come in, because it's never going to stop, that you have the toolkit to get through it. So, I love to use breath work for people and show them that is a way to instantly calm the nervous system, because the breath and the nervous system are completely connected. So I like to show them that they can control their breath to control their mind and take themselves, de-escalate themselves. That's one tool. But like I said, everybody's an individual. I don't do these one-size-fits-all programs, because have you ever had a one-size-fits-all shirt? Fits like crap, right? It's good at a discount. It's good for laundry day, but the truth is, if you're going out and you want to look good, you get your suit tailored. I have a tailored process that goes deep into each individual to find out what exactly makes them tick. And what they'll respond to, because everybody responds to different things based on our perceptions and our preferences. So with meditation, though, I do build a new reality. and I allow someone to play in it for a while. And when they can experience that firsthand, they can take it with them. Because, you know, there's that whole thing about, was it Richard Bannister or Robert Bannister, the first guy to ever run a 4-minute mile? It was considered an impossible human feat for hundreds of years until one guy did it. And after one guy did it, a whole bunch of people did it. He broke that barrier. So the mind has to believe that it's possible first. The mind has to live in that experience first, and then material, the body can follow. So I like people to actually get a sense of the possibilities. And I do that with them, you know, with the deep work that we do together. And then I combine that with, it seems to be sort of my gift, is these guided meditations that I do for people. And they just come ad hoc, and they do make some great changes. But I do want to stress that I don't dissolve the blockages. I show people that their own ability to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think you should ever be reliant on me. You should be your own healer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all creators, but 99% of us are consumers, and the most consumptions is the fringe benefits of the finite mind, that consumption that is all external, that ultimately ends internally, because it just keeps feeding on itself until there's nothing left and all mortality is evident. It becomes more and more evident as you continue. So it's like happening, what's most important is happening through you, not to you. And I think that really helps people start to get a sense of who they really are, that this is determinative by your own experience. As you say, it's unique to their individual expression of themselves as a facet of what we call the diamond of perfection. It's all, you say tomato, I say tomato, it ultimately goes back to that same unified state. But we must decipher our own Sherlock to our Watson. I love the way you said you like the mystery, you like the insight, you like the adventure back to that return. It excites me also, I must say. It's always fun watching people remember who they are and go, wow, I never thought I had this. It's here. I have it. I could do it.
That minute when that light goes off is magic. Oh, I live for it.
Well, the inspiration, especially for you, is your commitment to yourself, and it emulates through the basically the avatar, because without it, there's no sense of realization, because you need to give someone, oh, look, this is what I've conditioned for myself. This is what I've created for myself. And, to confess that you're the age that you are, you look amazing. And it's quite evident that whatever you're doing, you're walking the walk and talking the talk, and it shows. And people need to see that to give them what I call hopium. And that hopium is inspiring.
I believe that too. And unfortunately, there's just so many people trying to do this kind of work, and they haven't healed themselves, and, they're an emotional mess. They're broke. They haven't gotten themselves to a place, but they're trying to teach others because they go to a Bruce Lipton, event, or they go see Dr. Joe Dispenza. But if your life hasn't changed after you went to that event, then you're not processing it. It's great to relay that information to somebody else, but if you're not living it, you're not giving people hope. And quite frankly, you don't actually know how to do it yet. I have an awful lot of certifications behind me and an awful lot of experience through vast backgrounds that combine into my programs. But it's become very in vogue, and it's very important to do your research on who you choose to work with, because it is very important that they're walking the walk and talking the talk. Otherwise, they're just regurgitating some bullshit they heard on YouTube, and it's a great place to get a start. But everyone is individual, and if you want to really figure out what makes you tick, and you need some help doing that, it's very important to thoroughly interview the person that you're going to be working with. For me, I'm all word of mouth. My reputation is outstanding, and the people that I work with, generally speaking, end up telling certain people about me, or their neighbors notices an extreme change, and they say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And, I get all my clients that way. I've got a website, but I had to tell my web developer, like, nobody's just going to click on my webpage. Maybe there's 1 in a million that'll look at me and say, "That's the girl, that's the one I need." It's all comes out of who I am and how I show up in this world and how I'm known in my community, between morality, lifestyle, everything. And it's paramount to my experience and the experience of working with me.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're wrapping this up, but I'll say very much so when you said in closing how people are broken and then teaching others and they really need to heal themselves. So this seems to be a very big thing that I've noticed. I've been in this space about over 30 years teaching people Taoist alchemy. You watch the transformation of what people perceive as, self-realization, but furthermore, the evidence of intuition can be very detrimental to the individual holder of that power, that insight, because it from a polarizing yin and yang effect, the person that doesn't address it and return themselves back to that homeostasis, as you put it earlier, insight turns into internal consumption. So an inverted yin experience starts to wreak havoc on the body itself, because as you start to think more, process less, your insight becomes corrupted. It's not as now moment, because everything happens beyond light speed. The information is now. Trauma is now. Exit of trauma is now. Healing is now. Damage to the body is now. Exit of damage to the body is now. It's not a process. And I think that ambassador that you are to help people remember, hey, I'm going to teach you through your body, mind, and spirit that this is a very simple transition to remembrance. You may be taking the time to make it longer, and I'll give you insight to how that, why, as you mentioned that word, why it happens. But generally speaking, if you are to follow this, you will be instantly realized. And I think that 4-minute mile makes that possible. From a neuroplasticity perspective, we would refer to that as mirror neurons. So, now you're being able to apply it because you have seen it, and now it's yours. You have an emission of this in your own nervous system. So what is the limitation? Nothing whatsoever. If he can do it, I can do it. And I think that looking at you and everything that you've done, I'm just very grateful that you're another wisdom teacher that is sharing this incredible ancient knowledge through the body, mind, and spirit. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the podcast today. I'm going to put all your social sphere and interweb on this podcast where people can find you. I imagine you offer one-on-one sessions. You have a training system. Why don't you share with the audience a little bit more about what it is that you offer?
I do one-on-one coaching. It starts with a free consultation, and then from there we will develop a treatment plan based on your goals and your unique history. I also do private meditation instruction. I also provide guided meditations individually, and I do consult on Ayurveda, which is the wisdom of life. So helping people to live more in harmony with their internal and external environments. Sometimes those two can be sort of the kickoff block for a lot of people that are just starting to dabble in this. before they're ready to kind of take the deep dive into the work. But I combine meditation and Ayurveda with my work with my one-on-one clients, which is primarily what I do. I also work at one of the world's foremost holistic health retreats. It's been around for 60 years, and I'm really privileged to help people balance their mindset through cancer care, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, things of that nature. It's really just a blessing to do what I do, but I know that I wouldn't have survived without this work. I came out of, a family that was obese, and we ate terrible foods, and just sort of the typical American diet with the typical American anger and typical American health problems. And I knew I needed something different. If you talk to any of my doctors and looked at my medical history, I should be 300 pounds. There's cancer in my family, there's heart disease, there's autoimmune disease, you name it, my folks have it. And I don't have a thing. They've been on chronic meds, since their mid-30s. And I decided not to live that way. So it is possible. Don't let them tell you that you are stuck in this. And don't believe it yourself to take that way out. Everything is possible if you just take the reins. Your liver regenerates in 2 years. Every cell in your body replaces within 7 years. Your eyes regenerate within like 2 days. So you can turn this whole thing over and make it brand new. It takes time, and it takes commitment, and it takes the right mindset. And that's what I love to help with.
Well, that's amazing. I'm very grateful that you're contributing to humanity's remembrance and returning to selflessness and servitude, which is truly the default for the human or mankind. So I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast, Jacqueline. I really appreciate you, and thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing your amazing insights as well. I love it when you get two practitioners together that share the same joys, but have different ways of going about it that we can talk about. That always lights me right up. So it's been a real pleasure to be here, and an honor to be invited. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. One last question: what's your definition of spiritual consciousness?
What's my definition of spiritual consciousness? Awareness. To be aware, and to be at peace with that awareness. I think we can try and fight and change things, but to simply allow what is, and to find peace within that, despite whatever's going on, that would be my definition. And I think, that's sort of the practice of meditation, is that stillness where, yes, there's a million things going on, and I could check the alert on my phone that just went off and all that, or I could itch my nose, but I'm choosing to put that all as background noise, I like to call it, and decide that doesn't get my attention right now, that I'm the master of my attention, and I'm deciding where it goes.
Over 400 podcasts, never heard the same answer, because we're all a facet of the diamond of perfection. As it is, that's that beautiful part, million ways up the mountain. You say tomato, I say tomato, but it resonates completely. That charge we just got right now is a resonation that we are both in that unified communal state of awareness. And it's so, so great. You're such a pleasure, and I'm really grateful for you. Thank you for all your insight. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.